an American flag I built. I'm going to show you how to do it, step by step. Let's go through the process. I start out by going ahead and cutting out all the parts. I'm using the plasma cutter today to cut out the 50 stars that I'm going to need. I'll show you how I mount them later. Then I move on to just cutting the strips. This was pretty easy. I just used the jigsaw to cut out the straight slots. I also cut out the field and laid out with a piece of paper that I had printed out as a template where to mark and drill the holes for the stars to go. I'm going to weld them from the back so there's no welding marks to the face of the piece. This is a pretty simple process to assemble everything because we only have the one plate for the blue field where the stars are going to be mounted. Then I've got a big piece for the back that I kind of had cut out. I've done this flag two different ways. I've done it where I use stripes for both the red and the white and cut those into strips. This one I decided I'm going to try to do a big panel in the back and then use the 7 strips for the stripes on the front and weld it from the back. Then I'm going to drill some holes in the base plate to weld through so it'll hide all the welding marks. It should be a little cleaner, but it may be a little harder to bend. We'll see when we get to that point. So here I've just got everything laid out. I've got my 50 stars, got the stripes, got the flag, everything's ready to go. So it's time to move on to cleaning everything up before we start putting it together. Since this is going to be a finished metal surface, I went ahead and used a sander to clean the surface of all the pieces up. This is just probably a 120 grit sandpaper, and I just kind of went over the surface, tried to clean off any marks or anything that was a little surface grime. You can also see a couple of grind marks from the angle grinder that I used to clean up some of the drill holes. So I just kind of sand this down to try and smooth it out as much as possible. The cleaner this is, the easier it is to assemble and clean up later. It's a little easier to keep it clean, I should say. And then that's going to work a little better to put everything together. So we're going to go ahead and get all these pieces cleaned up now, and then we'll move on to starting the assembly process. Now that I have everything cleaned up, I'm going to move on to doing the stars. For the stars, I've got a piece of rod, and I'm going to weld the rod to the back of each one of the stars individually because I want the stars to actually stand off the surface a little bit. And I'm going to drill a hole and then weld the rod from the back to kind of keep it up off the flag. So once I get them all welded on, I use a little piece of angle that I had a hole in. That's about the thickness that I want. It's about 3/8 of an inch thick, and that's what I'm going to use for the depth of each one of these posts that I'm welding to the back. So then I just cut them off and clean everything up, and then the stars are ready to go. You can see they have just a little tiny post on the back, and I'll show you in a minute that's going to go through the hole that I drilled in the plate. So yeah, you can see here they fit real tight. I actually kind of have to push them in there after I got them cleaned up a little bit better. I needed to grind this one down a little bit to make it work better. But you can see that they're going to be kind of in there, and that way they're held up off the surface, and I'm able to grind it from the back. This is just going back through. I've got 50 stars to do, so I had to weld each one of them individually. Come back through. I left the rod long because it was easier just to hold it in place with the longer rod, tack weld them in place, and once I get it, then I would be able to move it over, drop it through this thing I have hooked onto a magnet, and just use my cutoff disc and just cut the star. You can see that one I actually threw. Sometimes the magnet caught it, luckily, so if I throw it across the shop, they're kind of hard to find. So I complete this process. I just keep going, clean up the end of it, grab another star, weld on another piece, and so I do this 50 times. So it took a few minutes to get this done, but it really wasn't as bad as it seems. It's just real repetitive. So once I get all these welded, cleaned up, cut to length, then I'll start mounting to the star field. I also did was after I got them welded, I used this belt sander just to kind of polish the surface of them so the faces are pretty clean before I start welding the pins in the back. I didn't figure I would glue it too much or ruin anything, so this was a pretty easy way to go ahead and do this without having to use a grinder later. So I'm just going to go ahead and get all these cleaned up, and then we'll go into mounting them to the star field. To prep the star field, I went ahead and got it cleaned up the way I wanted it. Everything's ready to go. And I'm just taking this propane torch, and I'm going to start in one corner and work my way across the entire surface. And so you're heating this thing up, and from the back you're going to see as it heats, it's going to turn to kind of a copperish gold color. And then as it heats further, it's going to turn blue. This is just an oxidation that caused by heating of it. And you just have to be careful that you don't go too far past this. You want it just to be warm and then just kind of let it cool off. So once it starts turning blue, I keep moving it to make sure I'm not heating too much in one place. And just kind of slowly move my way across the entire field to blue it. So this way it's going to be blued with fire and not with paint. With my star field blued and everything's ready and cleaned up, I'm going to start welding on the stars. Here I'm just trying to be careful to make sure I get them all oriented the same direction. But you can see how I can kind of just push that into the hole. I have it pretty tightly fit. And then just tack weld it from the back. So you can see it kind of heat up here. But it's not really affecting the star field, and it's welding and holding the stars in place. And these, you can see they're lifted and elevated off of the star field just a little bit. And I think it gives it a little more depth and dimension. You can see a shadow behind it. So let me just go through the process of going ahead and getting all 50 of these welded into place. As I have the star field done and letting it cool off a little bit, I'm going ahead and taking the base plate. This is going to represent the white stripes on the flag. I'm drilling holes. I got everything marked out. I'm drilling a couple holes, and I'm basically going to weld through these holes onto the stripes that I put on the front. I'm kind of aligning everything here using a clamp to kind of hold it together before I start welding it. I'm kind of pushing down, actually pushing these two pieces of metal together. Then I'm going to spot weld in between the hole that I drilled in the back plate and to the star field itself. This worked pretty good. You just have to be real careful. I don't want to get it too hot, but I want to make sure that I get a good enough weld on it. So I'm kind of having to lay something underneath there and keep double checking my measurements because I don't want to have to cut this thing back apart if I mess up my distances here. So then I'm just going to move through and weld each one of these spots and get everything assembled this way. And this should hold everything together pretty good. And it's making it a little bit easier than the way I did it before where I used all the individual stripes. It actually makes it harder when you get to the bending part, and I'll show you that here in a minute. Now that the star field's all welded in place, I'm moving on to doing the stripes. So I line each stripe up, kind of try to hold it in place, and check in between each one to make sure that they're lined up correctly, because I don't want to get these off either, but I'm welding from the back, so then I check the front. And you can see right here, it's just leaving a little bit of a mark where the weld was, but I'll be able to get that off with a grinder real easily, polish it off. So I kind of built a spacer. You can't really see it in this video because I kind of got it cut off, but it's a spacer that's giving me the equal gap between the flag stripes as I go along and weld them in place. I'm going to add the shape here, so I use this pipe just in a clamp on the vise, and so I'm just kind of bending and working my way back and forth on the top of the flag, kind of trying to make it look like it's waving in the wind. So I'm trying to be careful and put the bends where I think they need to be, and this took a little while because I had to go back and forth doing the back and the front to make it consistent. Now that I'm kind of happy with the shape, we move on to, I'm going to tape off the stripes that are going to remain white, and then I'm going to airbrush the red stripes here in a second. So this is a simple process. Just take your time. It kind of makes it easier that the one stripe is raised over the other, so it's kind of easy to line up the edge as you go along. Tape everything off. The waves make it a little more difficult than if it was flat, but I think it looks a lot better, a little more dimensional. So let me get this thing taped off and we'll go from there. I started painting the stripes now. I'm using my airbrush with a little bit of acrylic paint, and I'm mixing the paint colors because I put down a kind of a crimson color to start with, and it was a little too pink, so I came back and added a little red and a little orange in spots to kind of paint in the depth that I wanted it to have. The nice thing about the acrylic is it's not opaque enough to it still shows some of the detail of the metal through some of the scratches and stuff, which is what I wanted. I wanted it to look kind of translucent color, more like the blue does. So this took a little bit of time, just going back and forth, kind of applying it. It's not like putting a spray paint on there where it just covers everything. This is kind of a lighter mist coats, and you can see that in the next one I'm gonna have all of it done. And so now that I've got it all painted, you can kind of see some of the silver shines through, and everything's ready to be clear coated. Here's the flag after several coats of clear coat. I'm still adding the last coat here just to kind of clean everything up, make sure it's kind of a little bit more weather tight. I think it's turning out really nice. We'll see how it looks when it's done. I also added a couple hangers to the back so you can mount it to the wall. Just welded a couple of clips on there. Happy birthday, America. This is for your 250-year anniversary. Had a lot of fun building this project. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.